Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to a special Christmas and New Year edition of Compliance Man Goes Global, a part of the Compliance Report International Edition. As we are in the middle of the holiday seasons, Tim and I wanted to put together a holiday edition around gift giving, and in this episode we take a look at two myths around gift giving in compliance for emerging and high-risk market. In myth number one, we take a look at the question of, in our corporate policy, it prescribes that gifts giving is allowed. The main requirement is that the gift has to be of modest value, and we debate that point. On myth number two, we take a look at the topic that comes from senior management, which is along the lines that everyone in the organization knows not to give expensive gifts. There's no need to repeat this mantra during a specific holiday season. As always, our approach is to take the pros and cons to each one of these points and see if we can unpack the myths, disband the conventional wisdom, and explore these in plain language so that can be utilized by the compliance practitioner in the United States or in an emerging market. For this special holiday edition, we also want to wish you and yours a happy holidays going forward. This is Tom Fox. Compliance Man Goes Global and the Compliance Report International Edition are a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back for another edition of Compliance Man Goes Global. This is our special Christmas and New Year edition, where with my colleague, Tim Kazhanov-Baturov, we talk about and celebrate the work of compliance in emerging markets. In this episode of Compliance Man Goes Global, we're going to be celebrating the holiday season. In many countries, obviously Christmas is an important holiday, and December 31st is an important holiday as well, as many people will be celebrating the new year. It's the right time to talk about compliance and gift giving. Today, we're going to explore this question in hopefully plain language and a simple game form. And in addition to our podcast, Tim has developed the Compliance Man Illustrated series, which is a part of this offering. For our listeners who are not aware of our format, in each Compliance Man Goes Global podcast, we take two typical concepts, or perhaps more accurately, misconceptions about compliance from the in-house perspective around emerging markets and emerging jurisdictions. I might call it the conventional wisdom, and we try to unpack that. So for each podcast, we divide our roles with Tim, a compliance practitioner who is focused on embedding compliance programs in high-risk markets and emerging markets over his 17-year career. He and I split up, identifying the pros and cons in the arguments to the questions that we will pose to you. As a result, hopefully we'll come up with some practical solutions for the in-house compliance practitioner in the emerging market. But I should also emphasize that this is important for U.S.-based compliance practitioners to understand what are the challenges for not only the compliance practitioner in emerging markets, but also actually operationalizing compliance, your compliance program in markets outside the United States or perhaps Western Europe. So, Tim, with that introduction, how about we get started on our holiday edition?
Sounds great, Tom. Let's get started.
Okay, so we have myth number one. In our corporate policy, it's prescribed that gifts are allowed. The main requirement is that the gift has to be of, quote, modest value, end quote. So my question to you, Tim, is do you think that requirement is clear enough for implementing a robust compliance program in high-risk markets or emerging markets globally?
Well, Tom, I think it's a vague and non-practical rule. I have two arguments to be cited. The first thing, the cited statement from the corporate policy looks to be a kind of legal language. From practical perspective, being located somewhere in Central Asia, there is a challenge for local personnel to interpret this ambiguous modest value test. So it's very impractical from practical perspective to local personnel, specifically if they're not lawyers, to understand what is the concept of the modest value. Argument number two, even if there is an extra statement in the corporate policy saying that the value of the gift should not exceed rates prescribed by local laws, this is still a very non-practical approach. It requires local staff in various locations to research and understand local legislations. This might become a challenge, specifically in the cases if there is no local compliance officer who is in position to provide advice. What do you think, Tom?
So I think I perhaps am less worried about the vagueness of that term than yourself. Perhaps that's the difference in someone from Ukraine and some from America, or perhaps it's the difference in my experience as a compliance practitioner, largely in the United States, and your experience as a compliance practitioner in emerging and high-risk markets. So from my perspective, Tim, when we were talking about global corporations, obviously they're going to operate in many different countries across the world, and it's difficult to track the permitted values of gifts. That's why I find the modest value approach really serves as a good basic principle. Another way to put it might be the common sense test. If a gift seems like or appears to be too expensive, it really is too expensive. We have a phrase in America made famous by a tennis player, Andre Agassi, that perception is reality. And if your perception is that the gift is too expensive, I think that's the reality of it. I'd also like to pick up on a point you raised, which is what might be of modest value in Moscow, New York City, or Oslo may be of extraordinary value in a country in Central Asia and a country in Far East Asia, certainly in a country in Africa. So I think there needs to be some flexibility of the amount of the gift, depending on the location and circumstances. And I find that flexibility is embodied or accompanied in the word of modest value. The second thing is, I would agree with you that an organization should tailor language in local corporate policies identifying rules for each respective country. There are also legislation around gifts that you can give to government officials in each country. China, Russia, I mean, you name the country, they may vary significantly from country to country. So that's something that companies have to really think about going forward. So you have any
I agree
thoughts
with you,
on
Tom,
that?
and thanks. Yes, Tom, I agree with you, and thanks for raising this interesting principle, which I've never heard before, but I think it's a very right approach when you said perception is reality. This is something I think which really works, because I think you are right when you have a gift, you really understand whether it's a gift, whether it's expensive, whether it's excessive or not. So I agree with this approach, and I think you raised also a very interesting point with regard to flexibility when we're talking about the headquarters. Definitely, there is no practical possibility to check and monitor rates globally and then to amend corporate policies each time these rates change somewhere in the world. So I agree with your approach.
Well, I'm glad I was able to persuade you. So let's turn now to myth number 2. And this is probably something that you've heard quite a bit, Tim, and I think probably many compliance practitioners anywhere in the world have heard. And it starts with a statement from a CEO, from senior management, from the head of a company. And the statement is always something along the lines of, we are an ethical company. We are ethical. In our organization, everyone knows that we are not going to give expensive gifts. There's no need to repeat this. We've said it once. We say it in our written policy. It's a simple concept, and we don't need to repeat it around the holidays. We don't need to repeat it during any sort of special training. You can certainly repeat it at an annual training, but there's really no need to continually remind people about this over the holiday season, during a time of gift giving, whatever the situation may be. So what are your thoughts on this myth number 2, Tim?
Tom, I strongly disagree with this concept. To get certain level of ethics in organization, compliance officer has to be sure that everybody in the organization is aware about corporate rules on gifts and entertainment. Taking in consideration high staff turnover in certain industries, there is a threat that in absence of systemic communications, in a couple of years, significant part of personnel will be unaware about compliance requirements. I would recommend reminding personnel about corporate gifts rules beforehand each major holiday of the respective country. And this is very important when we're talking about doing compliance globally, because in each country there is particular set of holidays, and it vary obviously from one jurisdiction to another. So it's very important that compliance people are reminding about the corporate rules to people in each country beforehand the holiday season. And here I would like to pay your attention to the illustration which we have made as a special edition on Compliance Man Adventures. And as you might see from the illustration, we have depicted Compliance Man along with Miss Corporate, a prototype of business person, who are suggesting us basic principles, basic compliance principles to consider. So the gifts should not be excessive, and please check the local legislation in order to be sure that you are not violating local anti-corruption legislation. So having said that, Tom, I would think that it's very important for compliance people to remind periodically, meaning beforehand the holiday season, about the corporate rules to mitigate risks of violating both local and local anti-corruption legislation and FCPA as well.
So, Tim, on this myth, I actually agree with you. And if I could maybe pick up on what your thoughts were and take it in a little bit different direction on a couple of points. The first one is that this is actually an expectation of the government. The government expects you to remind people about when risks become higher. So certainly in the gift-giving risk-based approach, holiday season would be a higher risk than July, for instance. So the government would want to see a compliance program send out a periodic reminder specifically when the time was ripe to do so, and certainly during the Christmas holiday season is one of them. But the second thing I'd like to pick up on, Tim, is your brief comments about Compliance Man Illustrated series, because I think you've really hit upon a great way to message compliance, which is the illustration, the visualization. There are many ways that compliance practitioners can communicate integrity and compliance and ethics. Obviously, it can be in a face-to-face training, it can be a PowerPoint presentation, but it can be in things like video clips, email messages, which have something like the Compliance Man Illustrated series. The main thing is that your message must be effective. The United States Department of Justice talks about effective training, and they use that word effective. They want to see the training that gets results, and I think using Compliance Man, the Illustrated series, or other visualization helps to make your training and even your messaging more efficient. It also more fully operationalizes your compliance program, and that's another requirement, at least from the U.S. Department of Justice. Another thing you can do is maybe have a clip from a Christmas movie about an outrageous or outlandish gift, or a gift that is so small that it really should not have been given. So you can kind of use reverse psychology. There's really no need to circulate an email if the message is not going to be understood and effective. So your thoughts and comments, really even your creation of the Compliance Man Illustrated series, really illustrates for me and our audience the point that I want to make, that use different types of communication to be effective. And if I can tie back into the first point, always remember to document your communications around gift giving, both your annual training, any supplemental training, and then these individual communications at holiday or gift giving times. Because if a regulator ever comes knocking and wants to see that you have made your communications, you have to have it documented. So what are your thoughts on those points, Tim?
Tom, first of all, I would like to thank you for dissemination of words about Compliance Man, and thank you for support with regard to promotion of these type of communications. When we're talking about the Illustrated series and Compliance Man, for us it's very important that this communication is heard and people like it. And thanks for your support with regard to that. I made some notes while you were talking about the efficiency and effectiveness. For me, it's probably the key words. If it's not efficient, you should not do that. And with regard to compliance in-house population, I think this is the rule which we have to remember all the time. Because sometimes, you know, we tend to do things traditionally or classically, while, as you have said, we should think more about innovative ways or any other ways which will really work. And thanks for this tip with regards to a good movie clip, which could be used, for example, just prior to the Christmas season, to make our compliance message more effective and more interesting to people. And that will allow us to raise the level of efficiency of our compliance efforts across any organization.
So, Tim, I think you've raised really some good points, and I hope that we have the opportunity to continue this exploration of practical tips for the compliance practitioner in emerging markets and high-risk markets in 2018. So I wanted to wish both you and our audience Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and Happy Holidays.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this special Christmas and New Year edition of Compliance Man Goes Global, series in the Compliance Report International Edition. As always, if you have listened to this podcast on iTunes, I would greatly appreciate it if you would rate this podcast, as it would help in our rankings and help get the word out about this most unique podcast on Compliance Man Goes Global, where we take a look at compliance in emerging markets. Also, I hope you will join us in 2018 for our next episode of Compliance Man Goes Global, in which we will bust some more corporate compliance myths of doing compliance in emerging markets. Compliance Man Goes Global and the Compliance Report International Edition are a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.